What's going on? It's your boy, DameSmiff. And this evening, we're going to have a quick discussion about a quick little quote or really line or lyric that I heard from a song once. And he said, they shooters, but they not thinkers. And it was a subtle line. It was kind of thrown into the verse, and it lingered with me because it was kind of like he was comparing, I guess you could say, people who were very emotional and very angry or passionate about something versus people who are very strategic and witty. So with that being said, make sure you are hitting the like button if you want to enjoy conversations like this, and the like button will essentially just help other people find this video. And also hit the subscribe button so you can catch my latest video and see all the other crazy content I get into. So essentially, we're gonna kind of just discuss the line, and that's literally the line. They shooters, but they not thinkers, right? And so the main thing I wanted to take away from this was like, which person do you believe you are when it comes to your musicianship or your career in general? Because this honestly feels like a life lesson more so than a musical lesson. So when you think about what people call shooters, right? When people say it in songs or when they are maybe discussing it in casual conversation, in my life, in my experience, it's usually people discussing like, obviously the criminal element, but they're usually discussing somebody who's like a crash dummy. Like they jump out of their skin any moment they feel a bit of anger or irritation, right? And it comes in various forms. Like some people will be like, oh, I have a person who's just really into guns in my family and they're willing to shoot. That's not the person we're describing. That would be called a gun enthusiast. More than likely, they got their guns legally and understand the mechanics and gun safety, right? But the people we call shooters, right, especially in hip hop culture, are not those people. We're truly talking about people who are willing and capable of shooting, but not too interested in the consequences that come afterwards, right? And so that's kind of the poignant point of this bar or this lyric that I'm talking about, where he says they shooters, but they not thinkers, right? And it got me to thinking about like why somebody would get a gun or, use a gun and things like that. And, you can think of the obvious ones, right? Self-defense, something scary in the corner, anything like that, right? You can come up with any reason you want to get and own and use a gun. But what happens when you pull the trigger, right? We're not going to go into that, but do you consider that consequence? Do you consider the good consequence, the bad consequence? And when I came to that literal line of thinking, the good or bad consequence, it made me think of the film The Good, the Bad, and Ugly. And not in sense of the whole plot, but the setting. Like there was a time in America, and honestly the world, but I'll use America for example, where if you got in an argument with a bar, it was more culturally sound to, if there was, heated discussion, like you're willing to fight this person, it was more culturally sound for you to walk outside knowing that both of you are armed and to engage in a shootout, whether it's a standoff or whether it's some kind of, one-on-one type of thing. It was kind of culturally known, right? But the consequences afterwards is kind of what we all understood was going to happen. Like the sheriff's going to find out. And if the sheriff didn't find out, then they had some kind of cultural, small town way of dealing with it, right? But over time, that line of thinking still permeated in society and in culture. Like, decades later, 1950, 60, 70, 80, if I'm mad at you at the club, I'm going to shoot you or I want to try, right? But the thinking didn't last. So we knew at some point, I would say, that in order to get through this disagreement or this fight, we're going to have to resort to violence. But let's think about how we're going to, employ this, right? And that is kind of what I think is missing when it comes to culture and it comes to understanding of, de-escalation tactics and things like that. Because if you really, really break it down, most of your arguments today have, no life threatening purpose other than like, maybe you actually trying to attack someone else. Most arguments are about stuff and things and like feelings and traditions and culture, stuff that really doesn't matter when it comes to life. but we're willing to take and, ruin or rearrange or dismay someone else's life. And so now that's kind of where I sit on this whole lyric. Like, that's where it made me think. But up to this point, this is where I'm going to start to like kind of engage my own sensibilities and try to really challenge what's going on here. So like when you see lyrics like this, there is kind of a conversation to be had about, what examples he's pulling from. And then there's also a conversation about like whether or not we prefer to be thinkers or shooters. So it's kind of like the artist is taking a moment to really reflect you and yourself right back at yourself. And so oftentimes I see many other artists, they'll say, oh yeah, I got shooters, I know shooters, and shooters this. And even in outside of hip hop, just pop culture, blog media, they talk about shooters, ops, and all these cool words and vocabulary and stuff, right? But they don't really categorize whether or not you should or should not be these people. They exist, they're around, we utilize them, they utilize us, or maybe harm the people around them, but there isn't really a conversation on which one you should strive to be or are striving to be. So when you're thinking of like a young musician, a young rapper who's from an urban area, let's say the hood, whatever hood you think of, I don't care. Why would he choose to be a shooter and not a thinker? And it doesn't mean you can't be both, but just for the sake of conversation, why would you choose to be a shooter? If you wanted to be a successful rapper, shoot, a successful person, how far do you think this consequence will get you? And so when you pose the question that way, it kind of makes you wonder, well, whatever answer you come to lead you to say, I'm going to be a shooter, did you think about the consequence? Right? Because again, we have all these songs that talk about shooters and ops and things like that, but they don't really explain what happens. We kind of stopped doing that in lyricism, probably I'll say like the 2010s, a little bit before that, where artists stopped kind of reflecting what bad or realistic, I'll say not bad, but realistic consequences come with being the people that they are. And I'll say there's a few artists that still do it today. Honestly, I've heard Conway the Machine do it really well, where like he kind of really puts his life out on the table. But yeah, in like just a raw, like, look, it is what it is type of fashion, it's very rare to see. So that's why I think when we talk about shooters and ops and things like that, it's just salacious and provocative vocabulary. But what we're really talking about, like the people we're talking about, are murderers. Honestly, we're talking about people who are willing and capable of murdering. Because when you use the word shooter, it softens the blow. It makes you think of grandpa with a rifle. Makes you think of your cousin who owns a couple guns in his closet or basement. He's got an AK. He's in the hood. So you're not really considering the brevity of the statement to say that you are around or know of shooters. It means something different depending on who hears the word. And then when you consider what they're not in this lyric, thinkers, it's almost universal what we would consider a thinker. And it almost doesn't have a face, a color, an age, or gender. So you have more of an opportunity to be a thinker and actually fit the description than to call yourself a shooter and fit the description. And in both of these choices, to fit either description and enjoy the consequences. So that's something I think a lot of people don't really consider. But let me know, what do you think? If you were to choose to be a huge rap star today, would you hang around shooters or thinkers? Would you rather be a shooter or would you be a thinker? Let me know. Let me know in the comments. But this is Late Night at Dames. And if you want to see more content like this, make sure you catch me every night, Monday through Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern. And I will see you guys tomorrow. I'm out. Peace.